Welcome to FedScoop TV. I'm Camille Tootie. I'm the editorial director at FedScoop. I'm sitting here with Angela Zutavern, who's a vice president in the Strategic Innovation Group at Booz. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Let's talk about reform and reform in government. How do you define reform in the context of government?
Camille, reform is really the new normal. It can be a call to action to improve government services, a policy area, or a particular organization. It can stem from legislative action, executive orders, or a leader's vision to improve an agency. At Booz Allen, we studied the past 80 years of government reform, and we found an amazing increase in the volume, variety, and velocity of reform. Reform is no longer episodic, it's continuous. Government leaders tackling reform need to approach it as a normal part of ongoing operations, not as a once in a while or short-term problem to fix.
And what would you say are the biggest obstacles to reform in government?
I'll tell you, one big obstacle that leaders of reform face is that they don't always understand or aren't always aware of the common life cycle that every type of reform follows. For example, the people who are leading healthcare reform haven't had the opportunity to learn from the people who are leading finance reform and vice versa, unless it's something they see on TV. But our government leaders are doing the best they can with often shrinking budgets, limited resources. They shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel every time. So understanding that common life cycle can help avoid mistakes, inject innovation, and can really increase the chance of success.
What are the most important considerations when planning a major reform effort?
If you're a government leader planning for reform, it's extremely important to focus your planning efforts on the life cycle that's common to all types of reform. So there are triggers that lead to need for reform in the first place, and those can be political, environmental, economic, threat-based, or based on the performance of the organization. Then there's a reimagination phase where you need to understand in totality all the tasks that need to be accomplished and how to go about doing them. There's also a retooling phase where you'll need to build, modify, or scale up the tools necessary to implement reform. It is extremely important to define success up front so that everybody agrees upon what the reform is supposed to accomplish. So understanding that common life cycle can really help jumpstart your efforts, can avoid a lot of mistakes, and can help you inject innovation in the right places within your reform effort.
Is there a particular role or function within an organization that's critical to the success of a major reform effort?
Absolutely. One of the most critical roles is the leader or leader charged with the implementation effort. Reform is the new normal, but we still treat it as ad hoc. Maybe it's time for a new role, like a chief reform officer who could connect agencies, build partnerships, inject innovation, and really ensure performance. Politics aside, once a reform effort is agreed upon, it's important to use the taxpayers' dollars in the most efficient way possible to get that reform implemented. A chief reform officer, whether we call it that or something else, is absolutely critical to achieving meaningful reform.
How would you rate the importance of innovation, whether technical innovation or processes innovation, to reform efforts?
My number one piece of advice to anyone charged with implementing reform is to inject innovation. There's a great example I love of the Department of Energy working with a well-known business incubator accelerator in DC called 1776. And they held a competition over the weekend to develop apps to solve important energy challenges. The winning team in 48 hours built an app that would track and monitor people's home energy usage. Now, with a traditional government procurement process, it would take months to get out the statement of work, evaluate bids, award the contract, and get the work done. They were able to do it in 2 days. Another great example is challenge.gov, where agencies can post problems and they award cash prizes for innovative solutions. Injecting innovation is so important to any type of reform effort. It can really jumpstart efforts, avoid mistakes, and save money and time. The most effective approaches I've seen have three things in common. First, they recognize reform as the new normal and use a network approach. The second factor is really recognizing the common life cycle that applies to all types of reform, learning lessons from the past and applying those to jumpstart future reform efforts. And the third characteristic that I see in successful reform efforts is to inject innovation, to jumpstart reform efforts, and to use resources most efficiently. Sometimes reform comes with funding and sometimes it doesn't, but it's always an opportunity for government leaders. Success means improving a program area and also even freeing up resources to apply or redirect to other program areas as well.
Angela, thank you so much for chatting with FedScoop TV. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
I'm Camille Tutti and you've been watching FedScoop TV. Thank you for watching.